Good afternoon, buenas tardes. It is a pleasure to be here with you today to kick off this important and essential fireside chat to help you take command of your finances. I am Lori Burgos, Senior Marketing Consultant at Nationwide, and I would like to begin with a heartfelt thank you to Antonio Tijerino and the entire Hispanic Heritage Foundation team for their partnership with Nationwide and for bringing this important conversation to life, especially given what we're all experiencing. I believe most of you would agree with me that nothing has been the same since the pandemic. We are facing so many challenges, and most are feeling anxious, stressed, and maybe even discouraged, especially when it comes to money. CNBC published an article citing that 77% of Americans report feeling anxious about their financial situation. 58% feel that finances control their lives, and 52% have difficulty controlling their money-related worries. Perhaps you felt anxious or stressed about your finances, and if so, we hope that today you will be encouraged and motivated to control the controllables when it comes to your money. Regardless of where you are in your financial journey, there will be meaningful and actionable insights for you to take away. Personally, my financial wellness journey began later in life. Thanks to people like Beatriz and Paul, who will be speaking today, I managed to get out of debt and establish an emergency fund. And now I am focused on becoming work optional. You're never too young or too old to effectively manage your finances. We are delighted to have you with us and appreciate that you've made the decision to take command of your finances. I encourage you to engage with our speakers and ask questions. Please also be sure to watch for links we will post on the chat for additional resources. So without further ado, let me introduce our speakers today. Beatriz Acevedo is the CEO and co-founder of Suma Wealth, a fintech platform that expertly combines financial tools with culturally relevant education to help young Latinos through their financial journey. And Paul, who is a certified financial planner and CEO and co-founder of AllGen Financial, headquartered in Orlando, Florida, where he serves clients around the world in their quest for financial freedom. So Beatriz and Paul, please take it away.
Thank you, Lori.
Gracias, Lori.
and welcome everyone to this conversation that we're going to have. And we're excited about doing this. And I say this, I'm very honored to be able to do this alongside my friend Beatriz, because I know we're both passionate about helping people in general for this area, but very specifically our people, Latinos and Hispanics, around the country and around the world who sadly face challenges when it comes to their finances that are not typical of the mass population at large, but bigger challenges that hinder us, from really making progress in our personal finance. It's interesting because there was a personal finance survey that was done several years ago by a big company called TIAA-CREF. And they found that, the average population was at about 51% of a financial literacy level, but Latinos were under 40%, they were like 30 to 38% at that level. So we were even less, educated in this area, okay? And I say this because as a Latino, that bothers me, and of course, when we have less information and knowledge, we cannot apply that, which is not wisdom, right? To be able to make great financial decisions. So we see that people who have a lower level of financial literacy, if you will, tend to get in more trouble, right? So they're 50% more constrained in debt, okay? And more likely to not be able to deal with an emergency if it happens, okay? So this is the why. This is the reason why we want to be here today, because we want to share some real life stuff, if you will. I'm going to call it that, how it affects our people. But to do that, we want to make sure that this is engaging with you guys, because we want this to be relevant, pertinent to your lives as well. So we're going to encourage you that throughout the charla, the conversation that we have, this chat, that you ask questions. And we'll try our best to get to your questions on a timely basis, assuming we can provide an answer. So please feel free to type questions in the Q&A during the conversation. And we're going to be checking that periodically to make sure we can answer those questions to the best of our ability. And in light of wanting to engage you, we're going to actually have you answer some questions so that we know who's on the call. Okay, so if you have your phones or your computer keyboards ready, please be ready to answer a couple of questions here. So I'm going to ask our IT people to please bring up the first survey question for the group. And the first question is, I am blank years young. Okay, we want to know the demographic of the people we're speaking to today. So if you wouldn't mind answering this very quickly, we'll take a look. We'll give you a few seconds to get those keyboards ready, and then we'll go from there. And I'll just ask IT that whenever you feel there's enough answers on there, let's go ahead and show that to everyone involved. Okay, so there we go. Yeah, this is who we're speaking with today. We've got large population, pretty much the bulk between 26 and 55. Okay, is the bulk of the population. Those are pretty
A
evenly
lot of
spread.
millennials and Gen Xers like me, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I'm not a millennial. Of course, you guessed I'm a Gen Xer.
I'm there with you, so we're all good. But okay, very good. Thank you for answering that. That's very helpful. That's very good to know. So we have another question for you that we'd like for you to take a second to answer, as we have our IT people stage it, and there it is. The word that best describes how you feel about your current financial situation is blank. And please pick one of the following. Do you feel stressed, content, guilty, empowered, or frustrated? And there's a reasoning to these words. So please take a second and think, what's the one word of these 5 choices that best describes how you feel about your current financial situation, please? I feel we should have some Jeopardy music playing in the background.
Exactly. Exactly.
Beatriz told me I couldn't ask her to sing, so I won't.
You would not want me to sing. I have other talents, but singing is at the bottom of my list.
Well, we all have our strengths. All right, so let's see.
Let's see. Oh, wow. Okay.
Not surprising. Stress is the number one concern,
Followed by
frustrated. Yep. Okay. And then we've got content. Okay. We got some folks at content. We've got a group that's guilty. And then the least amount is most people don't feel empowered. And that's exactly why we're here today, because obviously knowledge is power. And we want to share some great information with you guys today. So thank you for sharing that. We appreciate your transparency there. And we have one last question for you today. So, you have a lot of resources for information, for finances. So who do you talk about your financial goals to? Who do you talk to about your financial goals? Is it usually a friend, a colleague, a family, a financial advisor, a personal or life coach, which is not necessarily a licensed professional, or ChatGPT? We got to throw ChatGPT in there, right?
ChatGPT at the end.
Absolutely. We're trying to stay relevant. So please take a few seconds and think, when you have financial questions, issues, concerns, who do you talk to? Or who do you type to for the last choice? We'll take a few seconds.
Wow, ChatGPT made it to the list. That's
yeah.
The world we live in, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And as they answer these questions, I mean, I'm in financial services, and we're starting to get training on what role that plays in financial planning and investment management and things of that nature. So it's getting interesting.
Yes, for sure.
Oh, and someone said, I don't speak to anyone as an option. And thank you for sharing that. That's fair.
Right.
That's a fair answer. We didn't have
that could have been
choice.
actually a really important one that you're just, some people say like, listen, well, I don't know who to talk to. And that's very common as well.
Yep, that's very true. Well, thank you for those. But it looks like number 1 is family. Okay. Number 2 is friends. Number 3 is financial advisor. Okay. And then we've got colleagues. Good. I know it is. 23% speak to a financial advisor. And then a personal life coach came in. Actually, no one speaks to ChatGPT. I guess we're a little hesitant to ask ChatGPT questions, which I'm not gonna, well, I'm biased. I've got a professional bias that I'm a financial advisor, right? So I'm gonna say, yeah, I wouldn't rely on ChatGPT just yet. But guys, thank you so much for answering those questions. That really gives us an idea of who we're speaking to, and it actually helps us frame the conversation that we want to have today. And that being said, Beatriz, Suma, your life, your journey, give us the scoop on how we got to where we are, or how you got to where you are today, ultimately to have this conversation.
Well, listen, I'll make it very brief because I don't think we want to spend a lot of time on my life and my journey. But I'm going to share it just because I know a lot of people, especially reading the poll, you know, I'm very similar to a lot of people who are on right now. And, you know, even though my parents, both of my parents went to college, they were the first ones in their families to go to college. And I went to college as well. We never talked about money, right? My parents did not plan for their retirement. They didn't trust anybody. You know, my parents were both from Mexico, and in one devaluation, they one day lost it all. And they continue with that post-traumatic syndrome. And so that wasn't a conversation that we had in our sobremesa at dinner. You know, we weren't talking about money. We weren't talking about investing. We weren't talking about any of that. Whereas my husband, who's not a Latino, those were their conversations around their dinner table, right? And his dad was giving, you know, the kids stock from companies when they were 8 years old, which is crazy, right? My dad could have done that because it's not like they bought a lot of money in that. They bought some shares and they were very inexpensive, probably less than, you know, taking a kid to Disneyland, with a lot of Latinos do. But then that started to set them up for life. And that's something that we don't do, not just because we don't want to, we just don't know how to, and we don't know who to trust, right? So for me, growing up without that information and knowing that a lot of friends and colleagues who went to college, and some of them, it's very funny because they say, well, tú fuiste a Harvard, you know, like you should know. And they're like, I'm in so much debt. And yes, I went to Harvard, but, and not a diss to Harvard, I'm just putting it as an example. It could be any school, not necessarily an Ivy League school. But some people think like, well, didn't you go to an Ivy League school? Like you should know. And they're like, no, they don't teach you this in college. So we don't learn it from our parents in our homes. We don't learn it at school or at expensive college. So who do you ask, and who can you trust? And then sometimes it's just a source of embarrassment, right? I talk to a lot of my friends who are now EVPs, vice presidents, presidents of these companies, and they're like, I can't disclose to HR that I don't understand my 401k. Like that would be really embarrassing. So then that's also another barrier, right? Being embarrassed of not knowing who you can trust. They're going to say, oh my gosh, how can she not know? Or how can he not know? So there's a lot of barriers there. And that's why, you know, I really wanted to build a company where we could all feel really comfortable and at ease not knowing. And we do things very intentionally. For example, in the case of the 401k, we have a series that we call 401k, like what, right? Obviously. And, you know, and people love it because it's like, oh, like I'm not alone. Not everybody knows where you know, you kind of know what it is. You can Google it, you can ask ChatGPT, but like, how do you pick? How can I disclose this to HR? So we want to make sure that we're meeting you at whatever stage of your financial journey you're at, right? And that we make finance really, really easy to understand and really accessible, and that we lean very, very hard into our Latino culture, into our Latinidad, and into pop culture as well, to explain concepts that might be a bit harder to understand, right? So we go out of our way to explain with food, with music, with whatever it takes, with funny memes, things that are important for our community to know. And, you know, that's how I'm here. My previous company is called Me Too, which, you know, a lot of Latinos know. It's a digital media company for Latinos, MITU, not the Me Too movement. Some people are like, you're the Me Too person. I'm like, no. I'm just a girl with the memes. So, you know, we built a massive loyal audience there, and we had a hypothesis, like what happens if we sort of use the same playbook of building community and just building a lot of engagement, but always talking about how to build wealth, how to better your finances for yourself, for your family. And yeah, that's what Suma is about.
Very good. That is excellent and so needed and so relevant to our times today, because as we saw the survey, you know, we got a lot of frustration, you know, uncertainty and doubt about, you know, personal finances, as you mentioned, a lot of times our own culture, you know, and the backdrop of our culture has been a hindrance, you know, because we come, you know, our parents may have come from another country and it's a whole different set of economic principles. And when you come here, but then who teaches them? So who teaches us, you know, and there's statistics. And I want to encourage you two things. There's an empowerment charla series that I know was done in a coordination between Nationwide Hispanic Heritage Foundation that talks a lot about these issues, you know, and some, and I think we're going to drop that the link to those series because they're available and accessible to anyone. But, you know, and when we talk about fear and concern, obviously that is a very detrimental any decision making, let alone finances, right? And then the fear could be augmented by the fact that, you know, finances, I think is, you had said earlier, I think we're talking privately, how finance is the number one reason for divorce and tension, you know, in the country, you know, and it's no different for Latinos. So when we talk about that,
heart issues, believe it or not, you know, I was telling you that the American Heart Association is an investor in our company, and when they reached out, I thought, I think they're confused. I think because some people say like, oh, you're the CEO of Suma Health. I'm like, no, it's Wealth. So I thought, oh, I'm sure the American Heart Association is confused too. We're not a healthcare company. And they're like, no, we're not confused. Like, we know exactly what you do. And it's so critical for us to invest, particularly with Latinos, on something that is financial literacy related, because the number one problem for heart health is financial health.
Wow.
And there's no, you know, true health without financial health. And I thought that was really eye-opening to me, because I would have thought, you know, I don't know, obesity or high blood pressure, or, I mean, and of course, all of those are definite factors of problems with your heart. But the fact that financial health ranks number one was really incredible and eye-opening to me. And of course, they've done so many studies around that. But I had no idea, you know, so I think, you know, lack of financial health really affects everything in our lives. So, but you know, the good news here, because we're here to, you know, feel better and, you know, move forward, is it's never too late to start, which is great. Right. You know, I love looking at that age demo of the, you know, millennials and Gen Xers who are like, okay, we are here. It's never too late to start. Never. Worse that you never do it. So there's always things that you can do and that you can start very quickly implementing. And you know what? And make sure that for the next generations, for your kids, for your sobrinitos, for your sobrinitas, that, you know, you do start having those conversations at the dinner table, that you do start considering, you know, it kills me when I read the stats, and this is all good for brands, right? So, and brands are my clients, so I'm not talking badly about it, but when you see like, oh my God, $2.4 trillion of spending power of Latinos, that's amazing, right? That we consume so much. But I would love to see a stat in my lifetime. It also says Latinos are the biggest investors, right? The biggest one contributing to their retirement accounts, because we see that those stats are not there today. Today, we know, and we saw with the pandemic, the very little money that Latinos had collectively in their emergency savings account. I think the number was $1,000 per family, which is crazy. And the pandemic lasted for years. So clearly $1,000 was not going to take us far. So I love for us to start thinking, how we only consumers, right, with that, to also owners, right? Because that's a conversation that we need to have. We are so represented in numbers. You know, we know that in California, in New York, in Texas, in Florida, there's one out of every 2 babies being born is a Latino. 1 out of every 2. And in the country in general is 1 every 4. So we are massive in numbers. But the reality is, if we don't have economic power, we will never have true power in this country. And you're able to do whatever you want with that economic power. My dad, for example, chose it to give it all to his foundation and to his nonprofit and back to the community. So it doesn't mean that you only build wealth for yourself or to buy a bigger house or a better car. Not at all. You're able to also have that power to support your families, to support your communities, to support other causes. But it is important, I think, that we start thinking of that mindset of from just consumers to also owners and shareholders. And it starts with us teaching that to our kids and to the younger generations, right? Giving them those fractional shares of a company that they might love. So instead of just consuming that, they know that they also own a piece of it. So every time they consume, they're supporting that company and they're supporting themselves as shareholders. And I never heard that from my parents. I never heard that from any family member, but I try to do that with my own sobrinitos now when they're like, Tia, we want Tesla stock, or we want Apple stock, or whatever it is that they're interested in. But it's a great opportunity, even things that you support. It's great to have that conversation. How does that work? How do stocks go up or down? What are those earnings calls? What does that mean? I mean, imagine if we had that information and that education since we were kids, Paul. I mean, life would be so different.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And again, we want to make sure that we stay relevant. What she's saying is so true. We go to these conferences and it's great to hear these statistics, where, although we're only 19% of the population, I think we're accountable for 39% of the GDP. That means we're spending money, which is great. We have a lot of, but what are we doing anything else other than spending? There was a study that came out last year, and it said that the mainstream America, aside from Latinos, about 61% of them have stocks or equity investments, okay? Where for Latinos, it was 28%. Okay, I mean, what a huge disparity in terms of actually owning assets, that are in the companies that we all know. Now, I'm not going out there and recommending that everyone go buy a bunch of stocks because, there's risk and you should be, informed of that, but just the getting informed and getting educated, not speaking necessarily to your neighbor because they probably are in the same boat as you are, but being able to be open enough, speak to professionals to be able to have this conversation. And that's something my mom taught me. And I remember my first job after college, I was the only Latino in this office. I worked for the Federal Reserve Bank. Okay. And I remember seeing some of my colleagues, and they were all about my age, we're in our mid-20s, all right? And I go over to one of the guys' booth. I say, hey, what are you doing? His cubicle. I'm like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just, adjusting my stock portfolio. I'm like, oh yeah, okay.
casually adjusting my stock portfolio.
He's 25 years old and he's adjusting his stock portfolio, which is great. But may say, I knew what he was talking about. I had no idea. My parent, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that looks great. Oh, yeah.
Good for you, dude.
Great for him. But I had no idea what that was. I had to learn that. And yes, and you said so truth. I'm very blessed to be able to have gone to Princeton and Harvard, for my bachelor's and master's, but they didn't teach me personal finance at those universities. So I see a lot of my friends and colleagues, which is what motivated me to be a financial advisor, who are with a bunch of debt and all this stuff and struggling out of college in prestigious degrees. But that's not what they teach you, so how powerful it is that we can be real, have these conversations because they make a difference. They make a difference.
Yes.
So I want to.
Paul, I have a question for you because you are the financial advisor out of both of us. And I want to make sure that we continue to encourage everyone who's on the call to continue to post on the Q&A.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll take turns. You asked me a couple of questions, so now it's my turn to ask you. But from Anaí Rivas, the question is, what would be the first step to create our generational wealth? What would you say as a financial advisor?
I would say,
for your question.
Yes, thank you for that. And yes, we said we want to be very practical. Okay, and here's the thing: we just got off of talking about buying assets, and checking our consumption. So this is going to sound very dry and boring, but you know what? It's the foundation. To building a house, you have to have a strong foundation, right? So building a portfolio, you have to have a strong foundation. And a strong foundation means one of two things. It means everyone has a portfolio, whether it's a bank account, whether it's, a checking, whether it's, money under the mattress. That's a portfolio.
Hopefully there's very little of that portfolio of money
bajo
el colchón, right? Because, that's just losing money, but we'll talk about that later.
That's exactly right. But one of the things you want to do before you start looking into tomorrow is make sure you're good today. Okay, and this is very practical reality. So a lot of us Latinos, one of the biggest hindrances to progress is we have a lot of consumer debt. Okay, whether it be credit cards, car loans, student loans, and again, I encourage you to go to the Charla, and we talk about how to eliminate some of that practically. But one, you want to get rid of the bad money. Warren Buffett says if there's interest involved, somebody's getting richer and someone's getting poorer. Guess which side of the fence you're on, right? It's usually the company's getting richer. Right. So it makes no sense to go out and make all kinds of stock and portfolio investments when you're losing it on the other side. I'm paying, what are credit cards? 20, 25, 30% interest these days. Okay. So you want to really take a look at your balance sheet, what you have right now, and make sure you get rid of all the bad money that's in there, which basically means get rid of consumer debt and be aggressive about it. It's not helping you, and it's only going to hold you down. So that's step one, if you have debt, let's get rid of that. Because once you clean all that out, and I'm not saying get rid of your mortgage yet, at least you have an asset that can grow with that. But this is unsecured debt, such as credit card, typically. Okay. But once you get out of debt, then we want to, again, protect ourselves, okay, from life happenings. I'm a very optimistic person, but in these conversations, I normally start talking about all the detrimental things. It's called risk management, right?
Right.
And, and we saw in the pandemic, and we saw in 2008, where people started getting laid off and things of that nature. And the ones who were able to survive and thrive even in that environment are the ones who had an emergency fund.
Yeah.
So something as simple as saying, I've got savings that if something happens to me, whether it's unemployment or, or anything, emergencies happen, I don't have to get derailed financially because I've got a fund that I've allotted for those types of situations. My car, I need a new car. Great. When I'm going to have to finance in this interest rate environment, when cars have gone up in price and all of a sudden you're paying all this. No, I've got an emergency fund that is going to take care of that, and I don't have to go backwards as much. Those are usually the first two steps that I find most people don't have in place when they start having a conversation with me and says, okay, do you have consumer debt? Great. How do we attack that? And then once you get rid of that, how do we build an emergency fund? We normally recommend, depending on your financial household, 3 to 6 months of expenses. Okay. And 3 to 6 months depends if you're the only breadwinner or, that's a whole, again, we talk about that in your blogs, and I know Suma addresses that. We address that at Financial Empowerment Charla, but 3 to 6 months expenses. And that seems a lot because when you think about what does the average American spend on a monthly basis? Okay, several $1,000s. So for me to tell somebody, oh yeah, you need about $15,000, $20,000, and they're like, what? When most Latinos don't have $1,000 saved. Okay, so it seems like a lot, but you can do it systematically if you manage your finances with this bad word called a budget. Okay, you need to be in control of your finances, not let your finances control you. And to do that, you have to have an idea of what's coming in, what's going out, and manage that so you create surplus in life. And surplus is key to be able to get rid of debt, to be able to build on a fund, and then eventually to start investing money for your future. So I hope that makes sense. Long-winded answer to the question, but I think it's a great one. So thank you, Anai, for that question again. If I may shift gears, I think Beatriz might be frozen on us for a second, but I see a few more questions coming in here. Are you back there? Oh, you're muted now.
Paul?
Yes, there you are. Okay.
Sorry. I don't know. Something happened. Something's happening to my internet, so I apologize, but I think I did catch everything else. I mean, I think both of those things are super, super critical. I would add a third one of like really knowing where you stand financially is super important, because it's very hard to improve what you can't measure. So if you don't know, like, where are you really, right? Like, how much are you really spending versus making? Obviously knowing all the debt that you have, but also the assets that you have, because some debt might be good, right? If you have debt because of a mortgage, that's like a positive debt that hopefully it's going to just add to your net worth. So we offer something that's a financial checkup. We call it a financial limpia. I know you guys with AllGen do the same. So you don't need to use Paul or myself, but
No.
you can look for those resources of like, okay, almost like when you go to your doctor and you get a checkup and they tell you, listen, you're a little off here in the cholesterol or in your blood, on your sugar, whatever it might be. And then okay, well, these few things I haven't read, and what's my plan to bring them back to normal ranges to be better. I think that's also very important, like having that almost like x-ray of your financial situation, everything, what you owe, what you own, where you want to be, right? Like we're like, okay, if I want to retire at this stage and with this, how do you start mapping it backwards of like, okay, what do I need to be saving or making or investing? So there's a whole plan that, I know, obviously a financial advisor can help you with. Obviously I'm biased. I love Paul and what they do. And also their plans are like incredibly reasonable. And you can start with a free like assessment that we also do with our financial checkup limpia, that we say we don't clean your bad money habits with like an egg or sage, but with data science. But at least you have it. You're like, okay, I stand here. And now how do I start setting goals in the short term, in the middle, and on the long term to get where I want to go? Because it's super, super important that you just it's never too late, but the sooner you start, the better, I think. So I think that's just important for everybody to just consider. And there's a ton of free apps or amazing humans like Paul and his company AllGen that can definitely do that for you. And I know there's a few more questions. I mean, the third one is easy. Can you take your 401k with you if you change jobs? Yes, that's a short answer.
Yep.
The second one is a little more complex because there's a lot of things that impact for the better or for the worse your credit score. We actually have an entire series that I don't have the link to, but I'm gonna get and hopefully put before the talk is over. But we have a whole series called Credit Cocina, and with super fun food analogies. We only teach you with these short videos, and they're in English and in Spanish, how to up your credit and what makes it, you know, get unbalanced or whatever. So we use food analogies like, you know, even though you might love, I don't know, I'm going to say something like a sofrito or something like this, you can't eat it all because that's like almost like your credit, right? You have to only use, it's just a portion of it. And then if you overuse it, then that's going to affect negatively. Or if you, this is one I didn't know, like if you close your credit cards too soon, like I was like, oh, I don't need this credit card anymore, I'm going to close it. It's like, that'll affect your credit rate. If you do a lot of hard inquiries, which we explained with actually 2 different tortillas, it's a soft and hard credit inquiry, right? The hard is bad. Just like think of like if you bite a hard tortilla, like it could chip your tooth or something. But like you really like those hard pulls on your credit can affect it. But some are called soft, and those are the ones who are like, that's okay to check. But if you're applying for all these credit cards, that's going to affect it. So there's not just one thing, it's a whole mix of things of like, how much do you use? How long have you had it? You know, how much are you overly applying to all these credit cards or lines of credit or whatever that affects it? So there's a whole list of things and a whole strategy. So anyway, I'm sure Paul has another answer, but yeah, it's a lot of things. I never thought about how many things can positively or negatively affect your credit. That, again, nobody teaches us about.
That's exactly right. No, you're on point. You know, there's several factors and a lot of resources that show you, you know, the 6 components of a credit score and all that type of stuff. What I would say at the end of the day when it comes to credit is, you know, you said it, you have to be in control of your finances and not let your finances take control of you. I think when you froze earlier, I talked about creating surplus, being intentional about having surplus, because surplus is what drives the engine for everything. You need surplus to be able to get out of debt. You need surplus to be able to build an emergency fund, and you need surplus to be able to invest, right? So the same thing with credit, make sure that you're using it wisely to hopefully buy assets like a mortgage, etc. I've seen people, yeah, I put my vacation because I deserved it on a credit card, and then 5 years later, they're still paying that vacation that, you know, and paying all kinds of interest. So understand that debt can be not a good thing if it's used inappropriately. Okay, so the sooner you learn that, and honestly, I told my sons, I've got 2 boys that are in college, I said, try to stay away from debt at all costs. Okay, unless it is to buy investment properties or things of that nature, you know, invest in a business, etc. And even then, you have to analyze: do I have enough liquidity? Which is the first part, right? The risk management side of going into those ventures. But consumer debt can be very deadly and lethal to a financial portfolio. So that's usually what I say, try to stay away. And I want to quickly address, I know you mentioned the 401k. Can we take it with us when you change a job? Yes, you can take everything you invested in that with you. You can take it a couple of ways. You can flat out take a distribution, but if you're less than 59 and a half, you're going to pay taxes and penalties if it's a traditional 401k. You sometimes have what's called a vesting schedule where there's a match, where they may say, well, you got to be with us X amount of time before you can take that piece of it with you. So the vesting part, what they match depends on how long you've been with the company, but your money is always yours to take. You can roll it over to an IRA and keep investing it that way. So that's pretty easy. And I want to encourage people to ask the questions in the Q&A. I know that a couple, I just got pinged.
I know there's some in the chat. I went through the chat while you were answering this one, and there's one that's getting a lot of positive responses of like, oh, what a great question, what a great question. So I'm gonna ask you this one. But you know, there's a question on, and it's very normal because we are those supporter. I am, you know, the main caregiver, you know, emotionally and financially of my mother, who lives with me since my dad passed away. So, you know, how do you recommend, Paul, that we best support our parents or aging parents that might have, you know, even like my own mom, did not plan for her retirement, did
Mhm.
not, and you are also trying to build for yourself and have that financial security for yourself, and then obviously for your younger family members. Like, what are your recommendations there? Like, I mean, because if they're already older and they didn't plan and they're going to be dependent on you, what do you do in that situation?
Yeah, that's a tough one, especially for, the sandwich generation, right? That like myself. So I had kids going to college, so you got to figure that out. But then you got your parents, my mom, aka, yeah, we got to figure that out.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. This is a quandary. Now, there's so many different considerations there, and I'm very transparent. My mom did not plan for her finances for her retirement.
Mhm.
My dad passed away,
Same.
before, and he was the breadwinner of the family, so my mom, is a typical Latino family. I'm the only male, so she became my dependent, right? Even before she became retirement age, but she never worked, right, outside of the home. So she became a dependent very young. So, I'm gonna go back. It sounds so basic, but one, you have to take care of yourself first before you can help someone else, right? So this is why we're here. We're having this conversation, and you have to create that surplus that I talked about, because that surplus is, again, going to be the gasoline that fuels the engine for the car to move, right? So there are different considerations. You have to be well versed on Social Security. And Social Security is an issue depending on if both spouses worked. Okay, do you take one and suspend the other? And I'm not going to give a whole lot of Social Security. We can have a session on that if it makes sense. But you have to become aware of what the options are for maximizing your Social Security benefits. Okay, and then learning what Medicare means, at 65 and the different options there. So and it's hard because there's so many people in different places. But if you are going to own your parents' financial well-being, and there's going to be an ego question, because my mom, God bless her, never wants to take money from me. Even though I'm not, Mom, I'm blessed. I'm grateful that you helped me out, and I owe you more than I could ever give you. Right? And she says, no, but you work so hard. That whole guilt syndrome of, no, it's
No,
okay.
mijito.
Yeah, exactly. No, mijo. I hear that all the time. So it's
Mine
gonna
doesn't feel guilt. She's like, I
That is
gotta go to
great.
La Arroz. I'm like,
Yeah.
no more Ross, Mom.
That's hilarious. So, it's going to be have to be very intentional in conversations. Our parents don't know what long-term care is. Okay. And they think, oh, you're going to put them in a nursing home. And I know that's very hard for our culture to think, you're going to put your parents away into another facility, but at the same time, becoming aware of what the options are. There's a lot of in-home healthcare now options that a long-term care policy might cover, okay, for you. So there's it's going to take intentionality. And what I had to do with my sister, I just have one sibling, is have conversations. And listen, we're going to have to take care of Mom. Okay, how are we going to do this? And have these open conversations between each other to say, what portions of it are we going to take? If my mother happens to live half the week with me, have to live half the week with my mother or with my sister. I'm okay with that. We made those intentional conversations. So between Social Security, between Medicare, and the health plans, you have to all of a sudden become an expert, on senior health plans, because there is predatory stuff that happens there. So, there's no one right answer. It depends on the family makeup. Are both parents still alive? Is it just one parent? But you are going to have to be intentional creating surplus for yourself, because you're probably going to have to help fund some of those issues where there's shortcomings.
Yeah, I have a friend actually who I thought this was so brilliant, and I wish I knew about it. And I think, like, to your point of knowledge is power, the more that we learn even for ourselves on how we start maximizing the money that we have and making it, just grow, it's going to also help us with younger generations that we're responsible for and older generations. But she was telling me that she moved actually back to Miami. She was in LA because her parents got sick, and she was like, okay, well, listen, we're gonna need to get like care for Dad in the house and get this nurse or whatever. And the mom was like, no, mija, like, we can't afford that, like we're poor. And she was like, no, Mom, you guys are actually rich, because I started investing for you guys 30 years ago. Right? So talk about having the information. And she's like, and I was just intentional. I'm like, $500 cada vez. But when you think about compound interest on interest, that, like 30 years, that's money that she's like, they will never finish that money till the day they die. But should I have just waited and see? It's like, I knew eventually I would need to take care of them. So at the same time that I started for myself, putting this money, investing, whatever it is that you decide that you're going to do, now she's like well prepared. And I'm like, oh my God, what a brilliant idea. Because
Yep.
I could have done the same 30 years ago, right? Like being like, you know what, a couple $1,000s here, like just like take it out of my account, reinvest. And now I like, that's your fund, versus now last minute that we're all like, oh my God, what I need to budget, you know, for her, for this and for that and for that. But like, again, knowledge is power. As you plan for yourself, and hopefully we can change this conversation and narrative, I think, within one generation. Because if we, the more we learn, and there's so many resources now, the more we learn, we teach the younger generations, we're going to be responsible for ourselves, which means that our kids, God be willing, won't need to be in the positions that we are in, like you called it, the sandwich generation.
Right.
And so that means that, okay, we took care of ourselves. We can pass on that, you know, whatever assets we have down to them. That's how you start building generational wealth, right? And then our kids are hopefully also responsible for themselves. They pass down to their own kids. So it's, we can break this cycle, but we're not going to break it if we don't have the education, if we don't have the information. That's why, you know, it's so critical, whether you learn it in a traditional way or whether you want to learn it with Bad Bunny memes with us or however, and with tortillas or with arepas, it's all good. But we have to be intentional in just really understanding our finances. There's so many things with taxes also, what people don't even understand. I'm like, oh, you could have done this as a gift to a family member and that would have been tax-free. Oh, you could have done that. People don't know, right? And so people say, well, I don't have the money. I'm like, but you do. Like, you do, but you don't know sort of like all these rules and all. And that's why, again, and I'm glad I'm saying it and not you, but a financial advisor is really critical, right? Because it's like, okay, let's set a plan. Or do you know that you can get this tax benefit? Do you know that you could do this? And that is just really, really priceless, especially as we know, no matter what Ivy League school you go or your kids, they're not going to teach them this. So we have to look for this education outside of that. And yeah, I mean, and obviously in an hour, we're not going to have enough time, but at least we get the conversation going.
That's right.
I know there's so many new questions in the Q&A, Paul.
You want to throw some out there, or you want me to throw one at you?
No, I think they're all for you. I mean, personal savings versus retirement savings, which one do you prioritize? What's the best way to address variable interest rate debt? I think that's where we're at.
Okay.
Yeah,
do you want to deal with the
financial
personal
advisor I
retirement?
can take, but Paul's here. But if it's not Paul, really, like anybody that you feel comfortable with, right? Like many years ago, it was hard to find an advisor that looked like us. And it was very hard for somebody to really get you and understand that, listen, I'm responsible for my parents. But now more and more, there's so many financial advisors that come from our community. So somebody that is legit, that is certified, that you feel that you can build that trust and that rapport is amazing. So, you know, prioritize that, I would say. But
I will also say this, and this is what because we even have this question on our website as a blog, you know, how do you find a financial advisor? Because again, it doesn't have to be me, but seek professional help. You know, you've seen the ads, you know, if you're a doctor, would you perform surgery on yourself? Probably not, you know.
No.
You need an objective outside opinion, you know, hopefully who can bring more insight. So when you're looking for a financial advisor, Beatriz said it has to be someone you feel comfortable with, but there's some questions you can ask. How do you get paid?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to find someone who's a fiduciary, not someone who's going to get paid on selling you a product. Because there's a bias there. You know, they have an agenda. Maybe they're not an evil person, but their compensation is tied to selling you an insurance policy or any type of product. Well, then are they really going to give you the most objective advice? You know, so I say that that's one question. How do you get paid? What does our relationship look like? What can I expect? How many times do we interact? Those are three key questions that when you're asking a financial advisor, ask, are you a fiduciary? You know, registered investment advisors is a type of advisor in RIA. Those have to be fiduciaries. It means they have to put your interest first before what their company is wanting them to put on their clients. So those are a few ways that hopefully, you know, and then you determine with technology these days, do you have to have a geographical, you know, proximity, or are you okay with doing this type of interaction? We have clients at AllGen all over the world, literally, and the pandemic accelerated that process because now we can have, you know, financial reviews over the phone and webinars and all that, and Zoom calls rather. So you're interviewing someone who wants your business. So feel empowered to ask those questions, because that's who you want to hire ultimately as a financial advisor.
Exactly. And it's super, super important. And like we said, like really get started. And the fees are really not unreasonable at all. There are people like Paul who it's like, I'll lose money, but I want to support my community, which is amazing of him. But literally, like, it's just an investment that you won't regret. So definitely start there, because there's so much that you might not be thinking about that you can be doing immediately. So I think that's super, super critical. You want to go to more of these questions, Paul?
Sure. You mentioned personal savings versus retirement savings. Which do I
Yes.
prioritize? And,
Right.
and I know
That's
you
from
talk
Jesse
about some of
Martinez.
this. Yeah, from
Uh-huh.
Jesse. Thank you. You talk about some of this on Suma Wealth, and we talk about it as well, because sometimes the resources are limited, right? So again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. You want to create surplus, okay? And that doesn't mean living like a pauper, but saying, you know what, I may have to sacrifice something today to compound it for later. Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you do with that? Say, okay, here are the buckets that I need. Savings is not investing. That's very different.
No.
Saving is something that you're going to have there that's guaranteed, that is safe. Okay. That's usually where your emergency fund is, or something that you're going to spend. I'm going to save for down payment in the next couple of years. So monies that you're going to use in the next, 2, 3, 4 years, that's not investing. That's
No.
savings, because you want it to be there. Once you start looking further out, well, I want to maybe invest for my child's education because he's 5 and I have, 15 years or 13 years to be able to, okay, now you have a longer time horizon. You can start investing for that. And then retirement, you want to start sooner than later, because time is either your friend and your ally or your enemy when you don't have enough of it. But when you have plenty of it, then it can compound it, and grow and have money working for you. So it depends. Again, there's a lot of factors in terms of, do you have an emergency fund? Well, then saving for that should be priority, okay? Because that can affect you today. But at the same time, how close are you to retirement? So it's a balancing act depending on where you're at, to figure out, and I say this, an ideal number that's thrown out there is, you should be saving at least 10% of your income for retirement, investing 10% of your income for retirement. If you have that surplus, great. Okay. But our country is well below that number, sadly, and that's as a country, not even just as our own people, but that should be a target for you. The younger you start, if you're closer to retirement, you may have to accelerate that a little bit more, or make an adjustment to expectations of when you're going to retire.
Yeah, great. We have a lot more, which I love. What is the best way to start investing? I think we talked about that, right? Like, start small. Know that the money that you're investing, like, you could lose it. So don't invest everything that you have. And I think start in companies that you already are supporting, companies that you already love. And now that you're able to do these fractional shares of any company, it makes it easier. And that's how you start getting more comfortable and learning about it. But it can't be, you've heard the expression, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Certainly you can't just say, I'm going to bet everything here and hope for the best. It has to be sort of like that balance of that sort of like portfolio mix. And this is, again, where a financial advisor is really, really helpful to start showing you that. But I would say really start with companies you love, you support, obviously learn about them, and you can start small. There's so many other questions here. I think there was one about, this is another investing one. It's from Barbara Salcido, and it says, share thoughts on investing in annuities when in retirement, pros and cons.
Okay. This is going to be a tough one, because there's a lot of variables and factors that go into annuities. Okay. Annuities have been demonized historically because they are high commission products. That people who are selling them are trying to sell it to you because they're going to make a good commission on it, right? And they historically have locked your money up. Okay. If you are going to do an annuity, look for something called no-load annuity. A no-load annuity has no restrictions, means you can put the money in now, and if you don't like it, take it out next month, and no penalties. And so look for that. They're harder to find because there's no financial commission incentive for people selling it, but they exist, and they're very competitive these days. Okay, so now, is it the pro is that these exist now. So you have flexibility to be able to have money there. And depending on it, because there's variable annuities and fixed annuities. Right now, if you were going to do what's called a fixed annuity, which is take X amount of money and lock it in, okay, might be a good time. Again, not knowing your financial picture, you know, I'm always say disclaimer as a financial advisor, seek professional advice, you know, for your personal situation. But this is a better time for fixed income annuities because the interest rates have gone up. You know, so the bad news, the interest rates have gone up when you're going to borrow to buy a house, right? But on the good side, they've gone up if you're going to lock in a rate for, you know, an annuity type of situation, if that's what makes sense for you. Okay, now understand when you do a fixed annuity, you may be giving the money away for the promise of a certain income stream. So that's one of the cons, that you lose some of the liquidity sometimes when you give these annuities for the promise. You know, it's a safety measure. Well, I promise to pay you X amount, but that means you're going to give me the money. So it depends, honestly, whether an annuity makes sense for you, but they have become more in the fold. Now, talk about interest rates. I want to switch to a question that Milenka, I think Gutierrez asked, you know, does it make sense to grow your money in a high yield savings versus a stock market? You know, this is interesting because high yield savings, I talked about this a little bit. Savings is not investing. Okay.
No.
The good news with a high yield savings today is they're offering great interest rates. But if you looked at a high yield savings 2 years ago,
and it's insured up to a point, right? Versus the stock
exactly
market.
Right. That's exactly right. So, and, you know, most people will have enough insurance. There's companies, online brokerages that'll insure it, you know, up to $1 million. Okay, great. But it's a savings account, and those will go with interest. So 2 years ago, high yield savings, they're popular now because interest rates have gone up. So you'll see high yield
They
savings
were
offering
nothing.
there were zero. You were earning zero. So what does that mean?
Yeah.
If you're risk averse, great. I'm not trying to sell the stock market. Just understand, the less you make, the more you have to save and put away in order to get to a nice bundle of money to be able to be financially free, right? So it's not that one is better than the other. It's just they're very different elements. One is savings vehicle, one is a growth investment vehicle. And with investing comes potential risk of volatility, et cetera.
Yeah. But even there, I mean, if you look at historical numbers, I mean, yes, it goes way up and it can go way down, but at the end, it's a long game, right? So if you're not playing for the short, like, let me just get rich quick, which is not to do with the stock market. You just have to let it ride out. It'll go up, it'll go down, but eventually it's going to balance out. And, you know, that number tends to be even up, down, what, around 10%? Like, it's very rare that you're going to have 10% of, you know, a checking account. I mean, maybe, you know, now it's at half of that, some of them that are advertised, but you're never going to make as much. Obviously, with more upside, you know, you have the risk, and you have to ask yourself, you know, we have this sort of like quiz at Suma where we're like, learn your risk tolerance, and we do this whole fun assessment, like if you were a telenovela character, and we're like, you know, how risk adverse are you? And you might be like, I want something very conservative, and that's totally fine. And some people, but then again, you need to see, like what you were saying, Paul, you need to look at your entire situation, because if you're like, I'm not risk adverse, I want to gamble at all, but then you're like, you're in so much debt and you have no emergency savings, and you have like, that would not be something that a solid, you know, reasonable financial advisor would tell you, yes, go ahead and do that. Might be that you're like, listen, I have the cash, I don't need this money, I have no debt, I have my emergency savings, and I want to take this piece and just put it in, you know, in something that might be a bit more risky, but also potentially more rewarding. And that might be like, all right, like you're in a position to do that, right? But I think that it's very important. And I love, Milenka, that you say, listen, I'm not a market pro. And that's why if you're not going to have a financial advisor, then start very, very, very small. You're like, okay, I love this company and I'm going to put $500, right? Or $100. I mean, nowadays you can invest with $1 for some piece of a fractional share. And that just means like it's a little portion of a share, right? So instead of buying a whole pizza, you buy a slice or half a slice or whatever it is, which is exciting that people can do that now. But it's, every single person is going to be different, right? So it's super, super important that wherever you get your education, ideally, you know, a human that you trust, who is a professional, who's been doing this, just like Paul explained, that's ideal. If you want to
Yeah.
try to learn on your own and then take very, 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 smart risks on small things to learn, I guess that's your take. I'm not gonna recommend that, but some people do that. But now more than ever, there's a lot of resources and there's a lot of
Absolutely,
ways
absolutely. And I will even take that a step further. If you're going to start small, there's a couple of ways. Again, now you know what a 401k is, and if you're not, you're going to go to, Beatriz's website and look at the 401k. But that's a great place to start and just putting money away for retirement, especially if there's a match. If there's a match, that's free money. You're giving yourself
free
a raise.
money.
We're leaving it on the
Yes.
table. And what I like about that is, now here's the thing. In those 401ks, you typically don't have individual stocks, okay? And that's fine, because what happens is, a fear that I sometimes have of people starting with individual stocks is, they'll invest in a company that you know and love, okay, a Tesla or a Google. Well, these companies dropped over 50% last year when tech got killed. Some of these tech companies were dropping 65, 75% in a year. So all of a sudden you start, because Beatriz and Paul said we should start in a company we love and know. No, we're not recommending any particular stocks, right? But then you went in and put your $100 and it went down to 35, and then you say, oh, this stock market is awful. So normally I say, when you're going to start smaller, go ahead and invest in ETFs or general stock market indices and things like that, because it diversifies you. And these things don't go down with that volatility because there's a fear factor. And, I can show you all kinds of graphics that show that fear should not be the basis for decisions. And yet you see how many people let fear drive investment decisions. And, there's a Wall Street mantra, buy low, invest high. ¿Verdad? Pero what happens? Just the opposite. There's a graphic that shows that individual investors have averaged a little over 4% historically, when the S&P is averaged, like you said, 9 to 10%. Why? Because there's irrationality in the individual investors. So when the stock market crashes, oh, get me out of this. This is horrible. So they sell here. And then when everything's going well, oh, I want to get into that. And they buy here. Same thing happened with the housing market. In 2000, everybody was going crazy. 2006, 2007, give me some of it. And the highest volume of housing purchases were in 2007. Well, that happened in 2008. It all came crashing down. And then everybody said, get me out of here. Or they couldn't afford it. And they sold off. So they do the opposite. So I say, when you go into these funds that are diversified, it gets some of the emotion out of it. And if it's in a retirement plan at work and you get a match, that's a great, simple place to start and usually start building confidence. And I'm always going to be biased to say, speak to an expert as well, as far as expanding that.
Of course. Listen, we could be here for,
oh, yes.
this was an hour, so we could be here for 10 hours, but obviously we only have 2 more minutes left. I'm sorry we didn't get to answer all of your questions, but, Paul and I are always available. Hopefully you can find us through our own companies, or like we said, there's a lot of other options out there in the world, but whatever you do, we want to really encourage you to take control of your command, like our talk says, of your finances. Never too early or too late to start. And I know, Paul, you're going to close us out.
Yes. Again, I want to thank you for being here. That's a great step in wanting to take control of your financial future. As Bea mentioned, there's so many resources, and we make ourselves available. I think you're all going to get emailed a copy of some of these resources, but Suma Wealth is one of them that you can go to Beatriz's website, her company, and a plethora of resources there. We have a AllGen Academy that's free to anyone who subscribes. I think the link is in the chat as well. You can also find us through these websites, through our personal stuff. If you want to send me emails with your questions, and I even invite our host today to send me the questions, I can have myself or our team respond, to the best of our ability. And I know a lot of our answers are going to be, well, it depends on your situation, but we're happy to have that conversation and help you, as long as I know Beatriz is committed to this. So and so are we. So we want to thank again, the Hispanic Heritage Foundation and Nationwide, because they do so much to really promote empowering our community, especially in the area of finances. Let me encourage you again to go to the Charlas, also the Financial Empowerment Series. There's a lot of great information there. And hopefully we'll see you at a future event. And we wish you great financial empowerment and investing. Bea, you wanted to close out by saying something?
You know what? Yes, I forgot just to say, we have 2 free programs that are pretty robust, but super fun and easy to take. One is our Dinero Bootcamp, which has all the basics. What's a 401k? How do I start planning for retirement. It's a curriculum base. We do it in conjunction with the Arizona State University. It's super
Wonderful.
fun. It's super fun. It's super easy, but it does have that validation of a university. And you guys will get a certification from ASU, should you want it, from Arizona State University. And it's like a personal finance certificate. It's very easy. Probably the whole thing to complete is 3 hours. You do it at your own pace. And for anybody who
Oh no. Oh no, I think we lost her. I think we lost her. Well, let me just encourage you, if she doesn't come back, to reach out to her. I know her information. She's a very busy woman, but she will get back to you to see what that second resource is. And if not, we can ask her offline and have that also emailed to you.
who has a more entrepreneurial,
Oh,
hello?
there you are. You froze on me there for a second.
Hello? I think I lost you guys. Oh, I froze again. I'm so sorry. I was just going to very quickly say, for anybody who has a more entrepreneurial mindset here, we have our Jefa Business Bootcamp. For anybody starting
Yeah, it looks like
a company, wanting to start a company, we have that available as well.
okay.
And those are both on the chat, guys.
There you go. Guys, thank you so much again for listening. We wish you well in your financial endeavors, and hopefully we'll see you at an event soon. Beatriz, thank you. Always a pleasure to hang out with you. And again, happy savings and investing. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.